In a world that seems increasingly adrift from its spiritual anchors, a world where the relentless, often turbulent currents of modernism threaten to pull the timeless truths of faith into an abyss of fleeting trends, ephemeral preferences, and a dangerous relativism, Cardinal Burke's voice rings out not merely as a theological dissertation or an academic lecture. Rather, it resounds as a clarion call, a poignant lament, a powerful indictment, and a fervent, heartfelt plea for the urgent restoration of what he believes has been tragically lost, deliberately suppressed, and, most painfully, actively punished by those in authority. His address was not delivered from a detached, ivory tower academic pulpit, but from the depths of a deeply pastoral heart, a heart burdened by the immense spiritual suffering of countless souls who feel alienated and orphaned within their own spiritual home. It was a message delivered with the gravitas of a seasoned warrior of Christ, a shepherd profoundly concerned for his scattered flock, a prelate deeply immersed in the theological and canonical patrimony of the Church. His words delved into the very fabric of faith and culture, centering on the sacred worship as the highest, most profound expression of Catholic belief, and crucially, on the indispensable, immutable role of tradition as the very bedrock, the unyielding foundation, the enduring inheritance of Catholic liturgy. The Cardinal began his discourse by casting our minds back to the ancient, vibrant yet troubled city of Corinth, a bustling metropolis of commerce and culture where, even in the nascent fervor and spiritual intensity of the early Church, divisions, factions, and internal strife had alarmingly begun to corrupt the most sacred act of all, the celebration of the Holy Eucharist. It was a stark and unsettling parallel, a deliberate historical bridge meticulously drawn by Burke, connecting the struggles of St. Paul and the nascent Christian community to the profound crises that beset the Church in our own tempestuous, uncertain times. He asserted, with chilling clarity, an unwavering conviction, and the weight of historical precedent, that throughout the long, arduous, and often tumultuous history of the Church, the corruption of doctrine and morals has not merely coincided with, but has invariably manifested itself in, the perversion of divine worship. This, he insisted, is not a mere coincidence, a happenstance of history, or a convenient narrative. It is an immutable spiritual law, an observable pattern that unfailingly reveals the inner health or sickness of the mystical body of Christ. When the inner life of the Church falters, when the purity of belief is compromised, when the guiding light of truth dims or is deliberately obscured, the very outward expression of that belief, the liturgy itself, inevitably suffers. It becomes a distorted mirror, reflecting not the divine glory, the sublime order, and the transcendent beauty of God, but the human failings, the doctrinal ambiguities, the moral compromises, and the spiritual decay that plague the faithful. This profound insight, rooted in centuries of theological reflection and pastoral experience, leads us directly to the perennial wisdom, the very lifeblood that courses through the veins and arteries of the Church, articulated in the ancient, unshakable maxim, Lex orandi, lex credendi. The law of prayer postulates the law of belief. It is a truth so fundamental, so deeply embedded in Catholic identity, Burke elaborated, that it underpins the entire Catholic understanding of worship. Our sacred liturgy, he explained, is not merely a set of prescribed rituals, a collection of rubrics to be followed mechanically, or a theatrical performance for an audience. Rather, it is, in its very essence, the highest, most sublime, most intimate, and most efficacious expression of our very life in Christ, our participation in His saving sacrifice. Therefore, it is an absolute imperative, a non-negotiable spiritual necessity, that this sacred act, this divine dialogue between God and His people, must perfectly, flawlessly, and unequivocally reflect true faith and unblemished morals. when the liturgy is twisted, when its profound, divinely ordained meaning is obscured, when its venerable forms are discarded or altered according to fleeting human whims, passing fashions, or even ideological agendas, it is not merely an aesthetic misstep, a stylistic preference, or a matter of superficial taste. No, Burke argued, his voice laced with conviction. It is a direct assault on the very faith it is meant to embody, a subtle yet insidious erosion of the foundational truths upon which the Church is built, a slow poisoning of the spiritual wellsprings that nourish the souls of the faithful. It is an attack on truth itself, veiled in liturgical experimentation. And at the very beating heart of this liturgical tapestry, at the pulsating epicenter of our Catholic life, lies the Holy Eucharist, not a human invention, not a communal creation born of human ingenuity or consensus, not a mere symbol or remembrance, but a divine gift, a miracle of infinite love, a tangible manifestation of God's abiding presence, received through an unbroken, sacred transmission from the Lord himself. Burke spoke of it with a reverence that resonated deeply within the hearts of his listeners, a reverence that transcended mere words, reminding them that it is, unequivocally, the greatest treasure the Church possesses, a mystery of infinite love and boundless grace, the true body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ truly present among us. Yet this most precious, most sacred gift is often received, he observed with profound sadness and palpable distress, with an alarming lack of due reverence, a casualness that borders on indifference, even contempt. This practice, Burke lamented, is not merely regrettable, it is a grave profanation of the body and blood of the Lord, inviting severe spiritual judgment upon those who partake unworthily, heedless of the warning of St. Paul. Imagine, he urged, the sacredness of this moment, the profound intimacy, the awe-inspiring, utterly unique encounter with the divine Creator and Redeemer. To approach such a mystery casually, with a mind unfocused, a heart unprepared, a conscience unexamined, or a soul unconfessed, is not merely a breach of etiquette, a lapse in decorum, or a minor transgression of a rule. No, in his solemn judgment, it is a profound offense against God himself, a wound inflicted upon the very heart of Christ, a public sign of a deeper, insidious spiritual malaise that has taken root within the Church. This pervasive casualness, this alarming lack of reverence for the sacraments, is, for Burke, a direct and undeniable symptom of the doctrinal decay and moral laxity that has, in his view, seeped into the very veins and arteries of the Church, weakening its spiritual immune system and obscuring its salvific mission. The Cardinal then steered his discourse towards the indispensable pillars of tradition and ius divinum, divine law. He declared unequivocally and with compelling force that respect for tradition is not merely a sentimental yearning for bygone eras, a romantic attachment to the past, or a stubborn, unyielding resistance to change for its own sake. No, it is far more profound, far more essential, indeed non-negotiable. It is an indispensable component of respecting divine law, the eternally righteous, just, and perfect relationship between God and his creation, a relationship established by God himself, not by human convention or evolving sensibilities. He voiced a deep regret, a palpable sorrow that emanated from his very being, over what he perceived as an exaggerated, almost exclusive focus on the human, sociological, and immanent aspects of the liturgy in recent decades. This radical shift, he argued, has led to a catastrophic loss of the very sense of ius divinum, the recognition of God's sovereign rights, and consequently, to a dangerous, rampant rise in what he termed liturgical antinomianism, a casual, even defiant, disregard for established norms, for sacred rubrics, and ultimately, for divine precepts. Picture, if you will, a magnificent, intricately designed machine, a precision instrument crafted with divine wisdom for a divine purpose, now being tampered with by well-meaning but ultimately ignorant hands, each attempting to improve it according to their own limited understanding, their fleeting preferences. The inevitable result, Burke warned, is not an improvement, but a functional breakdown, a cacophony of individual preferences replacing the harmonious, divinely orchestrated melody of true worship that has resonated through the ages. It is precisely here that the role of canon law becomes not merely important, but absolutely critical, a truly indispensable tool for the Church's mission. It is not, Burke explained, a burdensome collection of dry, antiquated regulations, a labyrinth of bureaucratic rules designed to stifle spiritual freedom. Rather, it is a vital, living, breathing safeguard for ius divinum, a meticulously crafted framework designed to protect the sacred. Canon law, he illuminated, facilitates the organic, healthy development of love, grace, and charisms within the Church, ensuring that spiritual growth occurs within the divinely established order and according to God's holy will, preventing arbitrary innovations that lead to disorder. He drew a compelling, undeniable connection between the first 3 commandments of the Decalogue, those commandments that speak directly to our relationship with God, to our duties of worship and reverence, and the very essence of ius divinum. He demonstrated with clarity how divine law establishes and meticulously protects God's inherent right to be acknowledged, honored, and adored precisely as He commands, not as we might prefer or imagine. To disregard these laws, then, is not merely a disciplinary infraction, a minor administrative oversight, or a negligible deviation from a rule. It is, in its profound implications, a direct affront to God's rightful place in our worship, a challenge to His divine authority, a rebellion against His holy will. The Cardinal then navigated the intricate and often contentious complexities surrounding the Second Vatican Council, specifically addressing the Constitution's Sacrosanctum Concilium, the seminal document that shaped the liturgical reforms of the modern era. He meticulously articulated his understanding of the Council's true, overarching intention, not to create something entirely new, a rupture with the past, but to purify the liturgy, to make it more authentic, more profoundly aligned with the inexhaustible fount of truth and grace, thereby transforming it into an even richer, more accessible spiritual patrimony for the faithful. He invoked the wisdom and the evident prudence of Pope Paul VI, who, even amidst the turbulent winds of change unleashed by the Council, cautioned sternly against unauthorized private alterations and rampant abuses, expressing a fervent, deeply pastoral desire for the magnificent prayer of the Church to resound harmoniously throughout the world, undisturbed and unviolated. This, Burke emphasized, was the authentic vision, a vision of renewal and purification within continuity, not of rupture or destructive innovation, yet a profound sense of lament, a palpable sorrow pervaded Burke's words as he recounted the tragic, unforeseen aftermath of the Council, a period he described as fraught with unintended consequences. He deplored, with a heavy heart that seemed to weigh down the very air in the room, the precipitous, almost chaotic abandonment of canonical discipline that he argued followed the promulgation of Sacrosanctum Concilium. This abandonment, in his estimation, led to widespread confusion, doctrinal ambiguity, liturgical chaos, and a torrent of abuses that became all too common, profoundly affecting the spiritual lives of millions. He cited subsequent, desperate attempts by the Holy See to stem this destructive tide, instructions like Inter Oecumenici, 1970, and Inestimabile Donum, 1980, which, ironically, served as damning evidence of the very pervasive abuses they sought to correct. The blurring of roles between clergy and laity, the distressing erosion of the sense of the sacred, the pervasive trivialization of the holy, and an alarming, generalized lack of reverence within liturgical celebrations. He buttressed his argument by quoting the incomparable St. Thomas Aquinas, who, with his characteristic intellectual rigor and theological precision, defined the falsification of Catholic liturgy as the egregious act of offering worship in a manner contrary to that established by the Church itself. This, Burke unequivocally implied, was precisely what had occurred on a grand, damaging scale in the post-conciliar period, a profound deviation from proper worship. With unwavering conviction and deep theological precision, Burke then turned to a passionate, articulate defense of the extraordinary form of the Roman Rite, often colloquially known as the Latin Mass, or the traditional Latin Mass. He meticulously detailed the successive layers of legislation that sought to regulate, protect, and foster its use, from the initial provisions of Ecclesia Dei to Quatuor ab hinc annos, and crucially, Pope Benedict XVI's visionary and generous motu proprio, Summorum Pontificum. He clarified, with emphasis and authority, that the term extraordinary should never, ever be misconstrued to imply anomaly, abnormality, or rarity, as if it were a strange exception. Instead, it signifies that this form is fundamentally normative, representing the usus antiquior, the more ancient, time-honored usage that has nourished countless generations of Catholics, linking them directly to their spiritual ancestors. He adamantly rejected the notion of a contradiction or a definitive rupture between the two editions of the Roman Missal, asserting instead a profound concept of organic growth, a continuous and seamless progression within the rich, venerable tapestry of liturgical history. To suggest otherwise, he argued, is to deny the very organic nature of the Church, to sever its vital connection to its glorious past, to declare a disruptive break in the unbroken chain of divine tradition that links us directly to the apostles and to Christ himself. The ancient form, for Burke, is not a dusty relic to be occasionally observed out of nostalgia. It is a living, breathing, profoundly vibrant expression of the faith, deeply rooted in the sacred soil of centuries of profound devotion and theological reflection, a perpetual fount of grace. Then came the moment of profound disquiet, the central accusation that resonated with unsettling clarity through the room, cutting through the academic discourse like a sharp blade. Cardinal Burke expressed his deep, visceral concern, his palpable anguish, regarding the recent motu proprio, Traditionis Custodes. His voice, though still firm and resolute, now carried the undeniable weight of sorrow, disillusionment, and righteous outrage. He declared, without equivocation, that this document had gravely disturbed liturgical peace, a peace painstakingly cultivated by Pope Benedict XIV, who sought reconciliation and unity, and, more chillingly, had raised serious theological and canonical questions, effectively undermining the very acceptance of the law it purported to establish, creating not order and harmony, but confusion, resistance, and division. This is not, Burke asserted, his voice gaining an unmistakable intensity that bordered on anguish, merely a matter of liturgical preference, a dispute over aesthetics, or a debate over musical styles or vestments. This is a matter of profound injustice, a direct assault on the spiritual well-being of faithful Catholics who, in the sincerity of their hearts, with the deepest yearning of their souls, simply desire to worship God in a manner that has nourished countless souls, shaped countless saints, and brought solace, hope, and true holiness to generations for centuries. It is their spiritual heritage, their very means of grace, being denied, even criminalized, in some interpretations. It was then that the starkest, most shocking words were uttered, words that left an indelible, perhaps unforgettable mark on all who heard them. Words that encapsulated the spiritual crisis he perceived. The papacy is persecuting faithful Catholics. It was an accusation delivered not with spite or bitterness, not with a desire to condemn, but with a sorrowful conviction born of deep pastoral concern, a profound awareness of the widespread spiritual suffering he perceived among the faithful. It was a reality, he believed, unfolding before their very eyes for countless souls who sought solace, holiness, and true encounter with God in the ancient traditions, only to find themselves treated as dissidents or disobedient children. This was not hyperbole for Burke. It was the grim, unvarnished assessment of the current state of affairs within segments of the Church, a situation that deeply wounded his pastoral heart. Yet, even amidst this dire assessment, amidst the lamentations and the stark accusations, the Cardinal's message was not one of despair or resignation, not of surrender to an overwhelming tide, but of a profound and enduring hope for the future. He articulated an earnest prayer, a fervent longing, a clear vision for the Church that resonated deeply with those present. The emergence of a new pope, a Pope Leo who, he hoped with all his heart, would rise to the challenge, understand the spiritual needs and legitimate desires of his flock, and bring a decisive end to this persecution of the faithful in the Church. This imagined Pope Leo, Burke envisioned, would be a shepherd who would embrace, rather than suppress, those who simply desired to adore God according to the more ancient, venerable usage of the Roman Rite, recognizing its inherent spiritual value, its profound efficacy in fostering holiness, and its legitimate, indeed precious place within the vast tapestry of the Church's living tradition. He underscored, with unwavering emphasis, the fundamental, non-negotiable necessity of respect for the juridical structure of the sacred liturgy, coupled with the urgent need for a clear, consistent, and universally applied discipline, all meticulously oriented towards the proper disposition of humanity in divine worship, ensuring that all worship truly leads souls to God, to holiness, and to eternal salvation. Cardinal Burke concluded his powerful, impassioned address by reiterating, with renewed vigor and a sense of profound urgency, the paramount importance of a reawakened appreciation for tradition. Not tradition as a static museum piece artifact, a mere historical curiosity, he clarified, but as the dynamic, living, foundational principle that should always guide Catholic liturgy, ensuring its fidelity to divine truth and its efficacy in leading souls to holiness. His ultimate aspiration, he shared, was nothing less than the full, unhindered realization of the true, unblemished intention of the Council Fathers and Pope Paul VI, that the magnificent prayer of the Church would once again resound with a harmonious melody throughout the entire world, a melody untainted by division, unmarred by persecution, and perfectly attuned to the divine symphony of grace that has echoed through the ages and continues to invite souls to God. And so, the story continues, an unfolding, deeply personal drama within the very heart of the Church, a struggle between what is perceived as legitimate innovation and what is upheld as timeless truth, between a desire for uniformity and a recognition of organic diversity within unity. It is a narrative of unwavering voices in the wilderness, advocating not for rebellion or schism, but for fidelity to the past, for a profound reverence for what has been handed down through the centuries, not for fleeting novelty, but for enduring truth, profound beauty, and the authentic spiritual patrimony of the Catholic faith. It is a story of countless faithful Catholics, scattered across the globe, yearning for spiritual peace, for genuine spiritual nourishment, for the freedom to worship God as their hearts and consciences, illuminated by the light of sacred tradition and the perennial magisterium of the Church, compel them. The shadows of perceived persecution may linger, casting their long, disquieting forms across the spiritual landscape, perhaps even deepening in certain quarters, but so too does the unyielding, luminous light of hope, carried forward by those who believe, with every fiber of their being, in the enduring power, timeless beauty, and unassailable truth of sacred tradition, awaiting the dawn of a new era under a Pope Leo who will, God willing, champion peace, restore harmony, and courageously uphold the timeless, ancient ways for the greater glory of God and the salvation of souls. The narrative of faith, struggle, and hope rooted in the very soul of the Church continues to unfold.